Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest defeat inflicted upon Boris Johnson's ill-advised internal market bill by the House of Lords, this time relating to the devolved powers being repatriated from the EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the main source of outrage regarding Boris Johnson's internal market bill are, of course, very famously the clauses that breach the Brexit withdrawal agreement concerning the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Even some Conservative politicians in the Lords who would have gone along with it, they said, had to oppose the move when the government announced brazenly, can't think of any other word for it, that yes, this is going to break the law. We're going to break the law. We're quite comfortable with that. Openly breaking the law is not traditionally a good look for even politicians, which is why it was only about 90% or something of Tory MPs who voted for it. And you would expect these clauses to be dropped at some point anyway. They're not going to have the legs. Seriously, let's look at it. Johnson cannot adapt them anytime soon anyway because the House of Lords has removed them. Johnson puts them back in, they'll take them out again. They voted by a huge margin to do so. I really don't see them backing down on this one. Johnson keeps insisting he's just going to keep putting them back in. Okay. And yes, he could force it through at some point, but not yet. And with Biden's win in the US, of course, he cannot possibly hope to keep those clauses in place because it scuppers both an EU deal and a US deal. I mean, being sensible, we can't do without either. We certainly cannot do without both. Simple as that. There isn't enough money in the world to compensate for that lost trade. But it has to be said that the bill holds a number of other terrors as well. It contains powers previously used in Brussels and Strasbourg, but now been repatriated to the UK. Now, what should happen is that any powers concerning devolved matters should, of course, pass to the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Scotland and Wales mostly for the purposes of this, because Northern Ireland, although it will apply to an extent, that's remaining at least in the EU customs union, at least assuming Boris Johnson is compelled to stick by his withdrawal agreement. However, Boris Johnson, in his drive to centralise all power to his office, which was powered by Dominic Cummings for most of the time has been in office, and I'll keep saying it, let us not forget, Dominic Cummings hasn't gone, he's just not in Downing Street, he's still in position, he still has his same job, he's just doing it from home. And what this has led Johnson to do is to try and snaffle as many of these powers for himself. Now, this issue isn't, it has to be said, as clear-cut as some. I am going to explain the genuine debating points here. So, for example, here's the scenario. The SNP, who have a large voice in Westminster, of course, second largest opposition party by some distance, they made the point that this is a power grab. He's snaffling, I don't think that was their words, but I like the word. He's snaffling powers that should be for the Scottish Parliament. Boris Johnson, in his response, has said that the bill actually gives the Scottish Parliament more powers than they currently have. But both can't be true, can they? Actually, on this occasion, yes, they can both be true, and yes, they are both true. So for simplicity's sake, we're going to look at the role of Westminster for the whole of the UK and Holyrood for purely Scottish matters. The same applies to Wales and Northern Ireland, just for the sake of being simple. Now, the powers being divvied up by the Internal Market Bill are not ones that either Westminster or Holyrood currently exercise. They are exercised collectively by the EU in Brussels and Strasbourg. Now those powers are obviously coming back to the UK, so legislation is needed to say which legislative body gets to exercise those powers in the UK, of course. And some indeed are going to Holyrood. So Johnson is right to say that the Scottish Parliament will get more powers. Just numerically, that is a statement of fact. And further to Johnson's point, the bill does not, to my knowledge anyway, don't want to speak out of turn, but to my knowledge, actually take any powers away. So you may be thinking, so where's the power grab in this? So what the SNP and others are correct in calling it a power grab for is because some of the powers that Johnson is taking relates to devolved areas of influence. So, for example, let's take health at the moment, very topical. Health matters are devolved in Scotland to their parliament. This is why they've been able to do their own thing with the pandemic. Sometimes they've worked with the Boris Johnson's government when Boris Johnson can be asked to talk to them, like they've struck a deal regarding Christmas, for example. But they can do their own thing. It's their choice. They can issue their own lockdowns, they can impose their own measures, organise test and trace however they like, and so on. Same applies to education. So, for example, in the summer, when they asked up the awarding of grades that was then aped by Boris Johnson's government, they both did the same thing, but they both did it independently, because that was a devolved matter for Scotland. So the current situation is that there are some areas that are 100% devolved to Scotland. It's entirely up to them how they deal with it. Now, if you take some powers relating to, say, education or health or another devolved area to be exercised in Downing Street, the UK government for the rest of the UK, or at least the rest of Britain, because some of them will apply to Northern Ireland, some not so much, then you reduce that figure from 100% downwards. In other words, the Scottish Government and Parliament they'll go from a situation where they have complete control over these devolved matters to one where they won't. And in theory, and let's be honest, also in practice with Boris Johnson, what will happen is that the Westminster government will potentially exercise powers that are antagonistic to what the Scottish Parliament and government are seeking to do for purely Scottish matters. And this isn't a Conservative against SNP issue, by the way, or even Conservative against all nationalist parties. This is the Conservatives against everyone else in Britain. All of the opposition parties in Britain are opposed to this move. That is why it's been defeated in the Lords. The latest defeat was a motion put forward by the Labour Party, for example, to amend the bill to force the government to first get permission of the devolved administrations before using any of these powers. So, in theory, if this all passes, Boris Johnson will be able to exercise these powers, but if he wishes to do so and have an effect in Scotland, he would first of all have to ask at least the Scottish Parliament. So that would solve the problem. You wouldn't be able to use his powers against Scotland's will. Same applies, of course, to Wales and Northern Ireland as appropriate. And the move is especially important when we consider what Boris Johnson did last week. He admitted his contempt for devolution. Now, I'll be honest, I was concerned that it was only the unlawful aspects of the bill that the Lords would tackle and that the rest of it would pass, maybe with a bit of fuss, but essentially it would pass. And it may well be that the devolutionary power grab does eventually pass through. After all, the Conservatives, in practice, they have the time to force it through. And there isn't going to be the same international pressure to get rid of those like there is the clauses breaching the Northern Ireland Protocol. Because the devolutionary powers are an internal matter of no concern to the US or the EU. But it does at least mean that the bill should remain collecting dust well into next year, potentially long enough for a change of Prime Minister. Not that I want to hold out any hopes of a replacement dropping these aspects of the bill. After all, what Prime Minister wants to turn their nose up at more power? Because that's what this represents. But there is at least a non-zero probability that whoever replaces Johnson will have enough political battles on their plate when they take over to maybe judge that this fight is not worth having in the grand scheme of things. But that's where it stands at the moment. If Johnson drops the clauses breaking the Brexit withdrawal agreement, he still has to face clauses that cockblock his power grab as well, which will take some considerable time to deal with, possibly more time than he has. But those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.